And then we're also going to hear from Kim. She is the Museum Service Director. She works at Battleship North Carolina, and she handles programs and volunteers. She's always looking for volunteers, right? And she's been doing that for over 32 years. And she also was the chief editor of this book, Battleship North Carolina.
I fell in love with her when I saw her. I'm talking about the ship, not my wife. Jackson Belford. She is beautiful, elegant, clever, hardworking, and enjoys a great reputation. And a lot of men have been in love with her their entire lives. And new generations fall in love with her still. I'm talking about Battleship North Carolina, the 55th battleship built for the U.S. Navy. She carried on the legacy of earlier North Carolinas, and the new fast attack submarine North Carolina continues that legacy today. My name is Kim Robinson Sincox. I'm Museum Services Director, and I've been at the ship 32 years and fell in love with her very quickly. She was commissioned on April 9, 1941 in New York City, the first of 10 fast battleships built during World War II, first of the North Carolina class, the most powerful naval weapon in the world when commissioned. Created to slug it out with other ships, but the attack on Pearl Harbor proved the importance of air control, and that meant aircraft carriers. She pioneered the concept of battleships as defender of the aircraft carrier. She's a big girl, 729 feet long, basically 2 city blocks, 183 high from bottom to top, 17 levels from large to small, 10 up, the main deck, and 6 below. 108 feet wide, just enough to get through what?
The Panama
Canal. Over 650 compartments. Oh, by the way, the Panama Canal was 110. 12 inches clearance on it. I like this one. For those of you who feel sometimes you're overweight, she was over 100 million pounds. Don't make you feel good any day. She had her own power plant. Her evaporators made 104,000 gallons of water each day for creating steam for propulsion, generating electricity, powering motors and pumps and dental drills for cooking food, taking showers, and brushing teeth. And I won't go through all those statistics, but if any of you are really geeky, we can discuss it later. She had 4 engine rooms with 2 boilers each, 121,000 total shaft horsepower, 4 propellers, and twin rudders. And twin rudders were kind of innovative. It meant she could do sharper turns. It also meant if one got knocked out of service, you still had a backup rope. Always a good idea. She could go 27 knots. Fuel oil, 2 million gallons. Giant floating service station for destroyers. A picture that Cindy showed, that was a tanker fueling her, but she could fuel 2 destroyers at a time.
Oh, wow.
Yes, that was an amazing feat. The fuel economy, this will make you feel good about your car. 32 feet per gallon. Or 145 gallons to mile. She was quite the weapons platform. And I can't wait to tell you all this because you'll be the first audience I've ever had that's going to truly get this in a second. But the other amazing thing, all of the guns used computers.
Wow.
Computers, our guns use computers. Now, not the kind in your phone or whatever, mechanical analog computers. If you want to feel really geeky, it's a 2-part training film that you can find on YouTube, 45 minutes apiece. All those computers is all gears and rods, and we're talking trigonometry. So when you're trying to take that 16-inch gun and hit a target, so the ship is right, it's going this and this, so is the target, Earth is turning, how many times has the barrel been used, what's the velocity of the projectile on its way out, what's the rotation, all this stuff. The wind, there's a lot of different variables, and those gears are turning, and they're doing all this complicated math. So the 5 and 6-inch guns use those big computers, and then the 20s and the 40s use a small computer, because what happens if you and I are sitting there at our gun and we see an airplane, by the time we pull the trigger, by the time the bullet gets there, plane's gone. So what those small computers are figuring out the triangle. I like geometry personally. And that's what it's figuring out the triangle. So you, the plane, and then the future position of where the plane's gonna be. So that little computer is figuring out where is it gonna be. So very clever. Now, what about these big old guns? So the 16-inch guns can go 21 to 23 miles away. And I always tell people, we could bomb Southport. But visitors from New Jersey don't know where Southport is. So, but you do. So just think that our ship could bomb you.
Wow.
I know. That's amazing. That's a daggone long way, you know? Those things weigh as much as a small car. They have two sizes of projectiles. They either weigh 1,900 pounds or 2,700 pounds. That's a lot. So it sounded like a freight train going through the air when they were flying through the air. Now the 5-inch guns can go 8 miles. That's still a long way, those 5-inch guns. The 5-inch guns can, well, I should say the 16-inch guns are used for, they're supposed to be for sinking other ships, but mostly what we did is we bombed islands. So before the Army and Marines go in and fight hand-to-hand, all that good stuff, we're bombing the island first. That's mostly what we did with those big old guns. The 5-inch guns could help sink ships or shoot down aircraft. The ship originally had something for anti-aircraft weaponry, though. We initially had something called a 50 caliber and a 1.1 if you're a gun person. And those got replaced by 40s and 20s. Because of course, the planes just kept getting better. So they had to have better weapons to even hope to shoot down aircraft. And those 40s could shoot 2 miles away and the 20s 1 mile. And what the guys told me, they said, you know, if you were down below decks, working the engine room or whatever where you were, and you're listening, the first thing is you're going to be hearing the 5-inch boom, boom, boom. Oh, by the way, if you're outside, the 5-inch guns, all those guys were losing their hearing because the crack apparently on those guns was so terrible. And then the next thing you would hear would be the 40s. Boom, 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 boom. Oh boy, that's only 2 miles away. If you heard the 20s were like machine guns going off, they said that's when you sweat and pray. So that was how they sort of tell what was going on. The war begins December 7, 1941. Battleship North Carolina is still on her shakedown cruise, as Cindy mentioned. She is berthed in New York City, and much of her crew is enjoying liberty. 6 months later, on July 11th, Battleship North Carolina arrives in Pearl Harbor. Morale in the Pacific Fleet was just about at the lowest ebb I think it was at any time during the war. We had already lost the entire battle force of the Pacific Fleet on December 7th. In the months that followed, we lost a number of other ships, including 2 carriers. The Japanese kept coming back for more. They were advancing all the way across the Pacific. Exhausted crews were really hard pressed to hold the line. We desperately needed help, and nothing ever seemed to come out to help. Finally came July 11th, and one of the most memorable, one of the most stirring things I've ever seen occurred. It was late afternoon when word came down from our signal bridge that something really interesting and something really big was standing out in the channel from sea. All hands scrambled topside to see what the commotion was all about. All we could see above the tops of the hangars and the palm trees was an immense tower foremast. I watched as this tower foremast moved slowly across from left to right, and finally the great and the immense ship, the Battleship North Carolina, suddenly came into view. And believe you me, it was just about the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life. One of the most thrilling and inspiring things I have ever seen. Captain Ben W. Blee, author of the book. The thing I remember most distinctly was the day we arrived at Pearl Harbor. Even with all the movies and pictures you saw, you couldn't appreciate the devastation that had taken place there. As we arrived and I looked at the oil-covered harbor and the broken rows of ships, I choked up. There were all the sailors, these crews, they cheered and cheered us. I couldn't help say to myself, they are cheering us for nothing. We hadn't done anything, we had not fired a shot yet, but to them, we were the symbol of help finally arriving in force. It broke me up. I admit to being a misty-eyed 18-year-old, Larry Resin. The men of the North Carolina. Now the ship, the numbers would vary. We were designed for about, I think, 1,900, but they added more the guns and radar and whatnot. And they had anywhere between 2,100 and 2,300 people. 9 different captains during their service. They usually only lasted, I shouldn't say lasted. I appreciate that. So what happens is these men are on their way up, right? Heading towards Admiral. And the ship is one of those boxes you gotta check on your way up. So usually they were only on there for maybe 3 to 6 months or something. Then they would make Admiral, and of course admirals don't run ships, captains do. So if you made Admiral, you had to go away. Worked for all but one of them. One was on there like a year and a half, but he eventually makes Admiral. And then the next person is your executive officer, who's really in charge of that day-to-day operations of the ship. And one that Cindy knows, the crew's favorite was Commander Joe Stryker. And Stryker said, now we got a new captain, and I have a little chat with them, sit them down, and said, you know, now if you want to make a few changes, I'll make a few. I said, but we got a good thing going here now. If you just let me handle this thing, I'll make sure you get first in your class in a few months, and you're up you go. He said, work for all but the one of them. And then we have at least one chaplain. Occasionally we had 2, but usually 1. And the chaplain was in charge of morale and the newspaper and stuff in the ship's library. Christmas 1943, the chaplain had collected money, $5 I believe, from each crewman who had children, and sent the money to Macy's. Remember Macy's? And they brought presents for the children and sent them to the crewmen's families. He had also gotten a group together to put on a show Christmas Day. Crewmen in drag, wigs made from manila line dancers, strippers, comedians, the whole bit. We received orders, however, that we had to get underway on Christmas Day. So the chaplain put it on Christmas Eve. It was a great show. The guys were great and everyone enjoyed the show. When it was over, the chaplain asked everyone to remain seated as he had a surprise for them. It was unknown to anyone, but Macy's had gathered all the children and wives of the crewmen and filmed them and sent it to the chaplain. Each child and mom would say hi to their loved one, and I don't believe there was many dry eyes that night. Chief William R. Taylor. And there's actually, we have, back in the day, and you would never believe this, back in the day, we didn't have TV, and, well, they had TV when I was born, but they didn't have TV, they had radio and stuff. And people would go to the movies to see the news, to actually see the news. And so we actually they have these things called movie tone newsreels and stuff, and stories, and they actually have a cute little story about this, the real thing, with the children, with the wonderful Brooklyn accents and all that good stuff. Now, Cindy mentioned the departments, and yes, there were 21, there were 7 departments, about 7 or 8 departments, depending on how you count them, and 21 divisions. And some of the departments, you can imagine, gunnery was the biggest, and about half the crew was in gunnery. And engineering was huge, because we had 4 engine rooms to man, as well as the big diesels and all that good stuff. The hull department, and on the ship, the hull is partly damage control, putting out fires, doing something if we're losing electricity, or when we were torpedoed, that kind of thing. Your communications, which was paid to be part of, radio, signalmen, and all that kind of thing. The supply department, which, Walter would be part of. Medical, we have a 33 staff hospital on the ship. You might not know this, but the small ships don't even have doctors. They'll call a person a doc, but we're talking a pharmacist, maybe, not even nursing school, okay, Navy training and stuff. The navigation, popping 27 people in there, and then the executive officer's office, which was very tiny. And as Cindy mentioned, we were a floating city. Galleys and dining, the captain, admiral, chiefs, and crew all had separate facilities. I mean, the ship really was all about rank has its privileges. Holiday chow aboard one of these ships was unbelievable. There is nothing near and dear to a sailor's heart than plenty to eat. Good food, pumpkin pie, roast turkey, ham, steaks, mashed potatoes, and gravy. Everybody complained about the food, but it was fairly good. They ate plenty of it. Anyway, here comes our big Thanksgiving chow. About 5 o'clock, they started serving. At 5:15, we got contact on the radar. Hostile planes approaching. Sounded air defense, everybody jumped up and left their beautiful chow sitting in front of them to go to battle stations. The cooks had to secure their area. All the food went into the garbage. Half hour later, we secured from general quarters. The plane didn't come in. They got ready to serve chow again. More enemy planes coming in. They threw it out a second time. We stayed at general quarters until just short of 10 o'clock that night. Finally, we opened enough doors that the mess cooks could get through the galley and prepare battle rations. Battle rations were buckets with a piece of bread, lunch meat bread. Lunch meat bread. Bread, lunch meat bread. Donald R. Wickham. And he was so cute. Donald was one of those people, he was one of the members of the band, but he had his own professional band. I mean, I saw a picture of Donald with, with the boss with the band's name on everything. So he was a professional musician. He joins the Navy to do his bit, and it's assigned to one of the Navy's bands. And he said every bullet was aimed at his precious butt. Now, on a ship where you sleep is called your berth. Now, the crew slept in berths. If you've been to the ship, you've probably seen the berths. But they're actually pretty comfortable, really. I mean, I always tell the kids, Marines and Army, that is camping 24/7, which it gets old in a hurry. And the officers, I tell people, I would show people pictures. Now, this is if you went to high school, this is what your life was like. If you went to college, this is what your life was like. I mean, the officers, they had closets. They had metal closets. They had chest of drawers. They had their own sink. I mean, it was nice. It was really pretty nice. I have to say, I've been on the submarine North Carolina. Man, those officers, it's 3 to a stateroom. And if you're in a stateroom, it's about like this because he can sit with his butt here, work his computer here. And that's about, I mean, that's about how wide it is. So 3 of them fit in there. And their sinks are literally like this big. And this is just the one sink for the 3. But at any rate, they had heads and showers. Fresh water was made daily. There always seemed to be a waiting line at most enlisted men's heads. To shorten the wait on more than one occasion, we would set fire to some balled up tissue and let it float under the men reading books or just taking too long. This caused many a warm, if not singed buttocks, but it did afford a seat to the next man in line if he was fast enough. Edward F. Coke. The first time I heard that story, and Cindy probably heard some of these too, you think they're pulling my leg. Are you kidding me? But by the time a dozen or so people have told you the story, and then to top it off several years ago, I had a man from a whole other ship tell me the same story. So I'm picturing flaming behinds all over the because it is just a trough. It's not, for some of the thrusters, it's just a trough with salt water running in it. Sick bay is a hospital with over 30 staff members. They had a library, they had sports teams, they had divine service, which is what they called church. They had a band, as I mentioned, and they had movies. I think I saw that movie with Marlene Dietrich and Jimmy Stewart, Destiny Rides Again. I think that thing must have rode all over the South Pacific. They would show Destiny Rides Again tomorrow night and the next night. We had movies pretty often. They would show them down in the mess hall. You were talking about hot. That is where you got hot. You would sit there and sweat, and it didn't matter how many times they would show the movie, you would always go back and see it again. If they showed it every night, you would go every night. Donald C. Rogers. We had a store, a snack bar, and a post office. Tailor, shoe repair, barber, butcher, bake shop, print shop, and 13 repair shops. A master at arms and a brig. That would be a jail, of course. And pets. I will always remember my pets. George, my cat, whom I pulled out of the bay at Noumea. Well, Knight was our ship's photographer, and he made up a Liberty card for him. George, that is. And he did. I'll get that in a minute. George, that is. George lived with me in the lighting shop for over a year, and then went over the hill when we reached Seattle. I also took a liking to quite a few lizards, to the dismay of Chief Petty Officer Walden. It wasn't uncommon to be reading or writing letters home, or making out reports and have one of the lizards peer at you over a book and or papers. Death of any lizard was a very solemn affair, with taps played on the mouth organ by Allen of the sheet metal shop, and burial of said lizard over the side in a miniature flag-draped matchbox. Services were usually held at night so that anyone in their right mind would not think we were bucking for a Section 8. That is being crazy. Again, another story from Ed Coe. Now, Ed's wife came to visit the ship at some point in the RV, and I went out there. And she pulled out this book and we're going through. And oh, y'all, if I knew I was going to do this, I might have see if I could borrow this. But there was this adorable thing, and sure enough, now they had the guys would have a rectangular, like you went to the principal's office, like your report card. It was this little, like a little teeny folder you could squeeze open, write the paperwork sometimes. And this was pulled out with the medical report for George the cat. Oh, I'm not kidding. They got George on the sheet, where it has like a body man, but you got George there, and they got little arrows pointing about the. about George. It's really precious. I wish if I had known, it was just adorable. And then I had to figure out how was I going to get it away from this woman, because I really wanted that thing for the collection. And I don't know what I said to her, but she gave it to us.
Oh, yeah.
I just think it's the cutest thing, George the cat. And I had forgotten this story until I was reading. I was like, yes, we do have that. We did. He wasn't kidding. They really did make up a thing for George the cat. It was his health report with shots and all kinds of stuff. It's distinctive markings, and it's really cute. Anyway, so the ship arrives July 11th and faces their first battle. They came on July 11th. August 24th is their first battle. This is in 1942. In the Battle of the Eastern Solomons. The engagement only lasted 7 minutes. It seemed like hours at the time. I remember going through and talking to the men in my division. The seamen manning these machine guns, they were the most excited and proud people. They fought like they had knocked down every single plane in the ocean. The real problem came after that. We were all claiming having shot down about 350 aircraft, and really there were only about 75. The Japanese did suffer a terrible loss that afternoon, and we became men. Maturity of our seamen and our officers after that, the change in maturity and attitude, the way we approached problems was entirely different. We had grown up in 7 minutes.
Wow.
Rear Admiral Julian T. Burke retired. A lot of our officers did really well in the Navy. Now, I can't show this, so I'll just let you know that if you go to the ship, there's plenty of armor. The way the ship was designed was based on treaty restrictions, so they had to be very picky about the armor. But the way it was designed, if you go, the main deck is covered with teak, and beneath it, it's only, I think it's about 1.5 inches. Make sure I get it. Yep, it's 1.5 inches. And you think to yourself, well, that's not a lot. Well, that's on purpose. So that if a bomb comes down, that's just enough steel to aggravate it, make it want to explode, right? So it goes through that deck and explodes in what we call the second deck. And as Cindy knows, the second deck is a lot of the daily life spaces. It's where they ate, it's the barber shop, it's the hospital, it's offices, things like that. Places where you probably shouldn't be if we're having a battle anyway. So anyway, that was the idea, it would explode there. The deck below that was like 5 inches thick. So the idea is it explodes in that daily life area and doesn't go any further down. And all your vital things, magazines, engine rooms, computer rooms, all the vital essential stuff is down below the heavily armored spaces. And there's other parts of the ship that are armored too, but I think that's neat. It's not all the same. So the thickness varies depending on how they think something's going to hit or what else is above it or all kinds of things, because they were trying really hard. You had to keep her weight down and still have plenty of space for fuel and the fresh water and all that kind of good stuff. The other thing I should show you is the torpedo protection system. So I hope everybody knows she was hit with a torpedo. Yes, sir. Oh, you just raised your hand. Okay. I didn't catch it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So the torpedo, so we were, as I said, we were torpedo, well, let me get to that. So July 11th, we arrive at Pearl. August 24th is the first battle. And then September 15th, we're torpedo. And the thing with the torpedo protection system, you look at the ship and you think it's going down like this. If you can really see her, she goes down, but then there's like this, it's like she's sitting in a raft. If you look at it going down the ways, it looks like she's sitting in a red raft. And that's the torpedo blister. So you've got this side, the ship coming down, and then this blister thing comes out, and it's compartments. In the middle of the ship, it's 5 compartments with like void spaces and fuel, alternating void and fuel spaces. Void meaning it's empty. So if we were torpedoed, which we were, you could counterflood, which we did. And where we were hit was towards the bow of the ship when it's 4 spaces. So it's void, fuel, fuel, void. So what happened, the torpedo first struck here where it was empty, and that expends a lot of energy. Then it slams through the next 2 spaces, which were, the fuel we used was thick, viscous like molasses. It was so thick and stuff, you had to heat it up to use it. So that's like slamming into walls. Then it goes to the last void space, expends more energy, and it never, then this is called the torpedo bulkhead. It did not breach that. It caused other damage, but basically the system worked. So that was really cool. So less than a month later, the ship was torpedoed by accident. And the deal on that is there were two groups of ships traveling together. Each group has a carrier in the middle. One had the Wasp, one had the Hornet. So we were with the Hornet group, here's the Wasp group, and we're traveling, and we're like 7 miles apart going through. And we're all headed to an area which is called like Iron Bottom Sound. There were all these Japanese submarines lying in wait for whatever American ships were coming through. And the I-19 sees the Wasp in this group. And they're thinking, whoa, an aircraft carrier, big juicy target. And the practice was you would send out a spread of 6 torpedoes toward your target. And surely if you're sending a spread of 6, you would think you would hit. And indeed, 3 of those torpedoes did hit the Wasp. But the Japanese had such superior torpedoes. Our torpedoes really stunk. I don't know if you knew that. You know, they would go out and then turn around and come back and hit you. I mean, they were that bad. And of course, the Navy bureaucracy, when the submarine captains would complain, oh, our torpedoes faulty? No, you know, kind of thing. And it took a while before they actually believed these poor submariners that, hello, we got problems here. But at any rate, so their torpedoes were so good. So the 3 hit the Wasp. The other 3 were so good they kept going, like the Ever Ready. They kept going and going. So they went all the way over to our group over here, several miles away. And so one of them hit the destroyer O'Brien, and she would end up sinking. And the other one hit us. It blew a hole 18 by 32 feet when we accidentally ran into it. So here we go. So the Wasp was scuttled that night, and the O'Brien bottom split open on October 19th, a little over a month later. The North Carolina lost 5 men, 23 were injured, and the ship went back to Pearl and was repaired in 21 days. I knew that the Wasp was torpedoed, so I went to my battle station right away, and I was sitting on top of Sky 2 before we got hit by the torpedo. One of the fire controlmen, Martineau, was the hairiest guy we ever saw. He was in the shower at the time. He was all soaked up, and when we got hit, he took off from the shower and was running up on the port side of the ship, and I am looking at him going by, and all I can see is hair and soap suds. No clothes on. He went into turret 1. That was his battle station. There was a fire in the magazine, so they flooded the magazine, and they abandoned turret 1. Here comes Martineau, still with no clothes on, but soap suds and running back down again. I was telling him about it afterwards. He said, well, it wasn't funny. I said, you weren't sitting where I was. That was Harold Smith.
That was Harold.
And Harold, oh, he was so funny.
He was funny.
And by the way, we didn't flood that much because the captain made a decision whether or not there was really a fire. And they didn't want to drown. Some of the men, we don't know if they were, I hope they were killed instantly. If they weren't, they drowned. And so he wanted to minimize. He just took a gamble and he gambled correctly. On April 6, 1945, the ship was hit by friendly fire and lost an airman. Today I'm starting this log on events happening in the Southwest Pacific. The main reason I'm writing this log is because 3 men in my division got killed today, April 6, 1945. And I knew them all well. It kind of gives you a funny feeling. I cannot express it right here. It seems as if tomorrow I will wake up and find it all a dream. I came so close to getting hit myself that I feel as if I was being guarded by something I cannot explain. I was on the signal bridge when it all happened. A 5-inch shell hit Sky 2 by the base. It was fired by one of our destroyers. I could hear the shrapnel hit against the steel on the side of me. Bryn, chief fire controlman, 21 years old, was killed from the shrapnel of the shell. He describes the wound in his diary. The best guy you could ever want to meet. Watson, fire controlman first class, was killed. He must have died instantly. He was just telling me he never wanted to take out any insurance because it was like betting the government he was going to get killed.
Wow.
Watson was with Bryn when he got it. Karam, seaman first class, must have been killed instantly. And I was just telling him at chow this morning after they passed the word over the speaker for all hands to be alert that this might be his last show. I guess I was right. He lived in Tennessee and was 18 years old. He had a beautiful girl and he was a 4-0 guy. The main reason why the destroyer fired and hit us was due to the fact that a Jap suicide plane flew over our bow low to the water, even with our superstructure between us and a destroyer. Our whole port battery opened up on him. They identified him as a Judy. We shot him down and he crashed on the starboard side of the carrier. It was too late. The destroyer had already missed the plane and hit us. I hope I never see a day like that again. I went to where the bodies lay below decks after it was all over and knelt down and prayed for them. Besides them, 44 others were wounded and 1 radium and lost. Gerald Cass. And Patty was part of that. He wasn't wounded, but he saw that. They said there was blood all over the deck, you can imagine. Running everywhere. So what was the job of the battleship? So we defended aircraft carriers with all those anti-aircraft guns. We had something called a Combat Information Center, which was kind of a new thing at the time. And so as radars kind of new, and it's an assemblage of various radars. So you have radar that tracks other planes and radar that tracks ships. And you're getting incoming reports and you're trying to decide, we've got several different boards where they keep up with information, and you're trying to figure out what group of guns is going to take on which plane. We also directed air groups from carriers. So we would be assigned various air groups from a carrier, and we would also tell their planes what airplanes, when the aircraft is too far out for our guns. So we're telling them how to intercept these enemy planes and stuff. So we did that kind of thing. Shore bombardments, we did that 9 times. So for every major campaign, we're going in to bomb the islands first. We did that. We refueled smaller ships, as I mentioned. We rescued pilots. We had 2 airplanes on this ship, and they could be sent out to rescue down airmen because it's got pontoons, it lands. You've probably seen the Kingfisher. That's only one of 8 in the world. 8 in the world, that's all there's left of those Kingfishers. And she's got pontoons so she can land in water and pick up airmen. There's some cool video of that on YouTube. The little planes could do anti-submarine patrol. We have a hospital. It's a 33 staff, so with smaller ships, they could send people over. One of the people that died on the ship was actually an aircraft carrier. They had a fire, and one of the gentlemen was burned pretty badly. And I cannot imagine being transferred through those lines. The ships are moving, this poor guy being transferred as a burn victim. You know that must have been the most unbelievably painful thing. And he died that night aboard ship. And we also had a machine shop. And we got very positive write-ups, whether it's like citations, kind of things, thanking us so much before, higher up the food chain, thanking the ship for the repairs, because it helped the destroyer keeping from going all the way back to Pearl to be fixed. We were able to create the part and they fixed the fixed the destroyer. And our mission, these missions were accomplished very well. We were in 15 battle stars. So we were in 15 campaigns. We earned a battle star for each one. We became the most decorated of the American World War II battleships. We carried out 9 shore bombardments. We shot down 24 enemy aircraft. When you're traveling with a group, it's really hard to know who actually shot down which plane. We know we shot down 24. And they also realized later sometimes it was good enough just to scare them away. So we did that really well too. We rescued 12 American aviators. And our CIC, which is that Combat Information Center, directed a lot of aircraft carrier planes to make enemy kills. And we didn't lose not one aircraft carrier under our protection. During the war, we lost 10 men that were killed in action. We had 67 wounded. We also lost a few others. One drowned, one was found dead in his bed.
19 total.
19 total. And one was committing robbery in New York City. So not everybody was a good egg, I walked a lighter step. I had a smile on my face. I think my shoulders were squared back more. My head was held high, my hat was cocked. I was cocky. I was a battleship sailor. We were the first. I think that is what it is. Being the first of a new line of battle lines, and I have news for you. When I walk up that gangplank and I salute the colors, and believe it or not, I am 67 years old. When I walk up that gangplank, turn to those colors, salute it, and look at that ship, I am 17 years old again. I swear to you, I'm a kid again. If I keep going, I will bring up tears. You can go home. They say you can't go home. You can go home. I am home. I don't know that I will ever have another opportunity to come here, but I am home now. I will be home for the next few days. Jackson Belford, during one of our pre-reunions. And I'll quickly finish up. What about the ship today, and what about the legacy of ships named North Carolina? Did you all know we have a bunch of ships named North Carolina? Or we did? Mm-hmm. Oh, good. So we had the big ship of the line, beautiful, elegant sailing ship from 1820 to 1867, who when she was an elderly lady, she was up in New York City, and she was receiving ship for Union sailors and Marines. And in fact, we have a payroll from the 1860s for the Marines. It looks like a spreadsheet, even from then. It was amazing. There was a Confederate ironclad built right on Eagles Island. The CSS North Carolina, part of her is still in the river. We had an armored cruiser, which was the first ship to catapult launch an aircraft while underway, which was November 1915. And of course, we have our ship, and we have a submarine. Do you remember when she was commissioned? 2008. So she's a fast attack nuclear ship. Oh, y'all. And the last deployment, ladies, she only has 12 to 13 officers, and 6 of them were women. Took us a long time, but we got there. And the reason it's going to be like 3 or 6, because as I said, you get 3 officers in one of those teeny little staterooms. So it's going to be like you either have 3 women or 6 women. I don't think they're going to go for 9, but anyway. I thought that was huge. That was really huge. We are self-supporting, so just so you know, we don't get any tax money. The legislature set us up to be an enterprise of the state. So I am a state employee. The ship is the state's World War II memorial. We're part of historic sites, like Fort Fisher and stuff. The only time the state has given us money are like the capital campaigns. So when we raise money for the teak deck, the state kicked in money. When we raised money recently for the hull repairs, the state kicked in money. So that's, so we are self-supporting through admission, store sales, rentals, membership programs, donations and stuff. We do have annual events. I don't know when we're going to have Memorial Day again, when we can say, look COVID in the mirror and say goodbye or something. We have our World War II reunion. We have all kinds of educational events. We have Battleship 101, which we just had this past Saturday. That's when I have volunteers throughout the ship, 50 to 60 volunteers who are there to tell you all about their particular station that they're at. We have Living History Crew do Battleship Alive several times a year. The 24th and 25th, we'll have our Celebrate the Legacy. That's when we have collectors. They collect various antiques from, say, World War I or whatever time frame. They will be there on the 24th and 25th in the wardroom with all their lovely collections. What else do I have? Oh, and this fall in November, we'll bring back Hidden Battleship. That's 4.5-hour behind-the-scenes tours of places where you don't normally get to go. So that's really cool. And, we have a lot of paranormal events, and we have military training. They come and shoot up rubber bullets and stuff at night. That is the military, not the paranormal people. Paranormal people bring in all kinds of fancy equipment to try to record stuff. Stuff happens. I'm just here to tell you, lots of stuff. And I don't just mean noises, I mean stuff happens. I'm not kidding. And sometimes it's funny. Sometimes you can tell they're just trying to mess with you. We also do military retirements and enlistments, and we do educational programs for the military. So that's really cool too. And we also have naturalization ceremonies when people become citizens. And if you didn't know, this was a surprise to me, I think it did a lot of people. There are a lot of folks from other countries that join our Navy, the military. I can do that. You can be a foreign citizen and join our military. And that gives you a quicker path to citizenship. So we have men and women coming to die for our country just so they can be a citizen. So I think that's very impressive. And it always makes me feel very humble. So anyway, so that's that. You all survived even without visuals. So do you all have questions for us?
Was North Carolina one of the battleships used in Vietnam?
Good question. So there were 10 fast battleships built during the World War II period. So the North Carolina class was first. And it was us and our sister ship, the Washington. So we were the oldest, right? Then there were the 4 South Dakota class, like Alabama, South Dakota, Missouri, Massachusetts, and Indiana. Okay, 4 South Dakota. So those 6 battleships were the oldest, and they were built with treaty restrictions. Then the Navy had already been designing the ships that would be, what if there were no treaty restrictions? What would be the biggest, baddest battleship we could build? Those were the Iowas. Iowa, Wisconsin, New Jersey, help me out, y'all. Which one am I missing? Anyway, the 4 of those ships. So they were the most modern. And when World War II comes along, they quickly realized battleships were going to be kind of old-fashioned. It really became all about carriers and submarines. And so we were decommissioned in 47, June of 47. But all those, the first 6 ships were decommissioned pretty quickly and put in a mothball fleet just in case, until they were eventually stricken from the Navy's list, which we were in like 1960. And that's when they're going to sell you for scrap. But the biggest, baddest ship, the Iowas, they kept those. And those are the ones that came out in Korea and Vietnam and stuff. And even the Gulf War, there was 1 or 2. And in the Gulf War, the ships, I think there were 2, at least 1 if not 2 used in the Gulf War. They were using the same 1930s era computers for the 16-inch guns. They went into test with digital, and the old 30s stuff was good enough. Just saying. That's pretty good. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, sir?
The Iowa kind of got lost because the Japanese made carriers and made the Iowa follow them. And then the Iowa came too late to meet the Yamato.
I'm sure if you say so, that must be true. Certainly the Iowas came out during World War II, but you're right. I don't know when the battle with the Yamato.
Was that the largest battleship?
The Yamato was one of the reasons we found some of the countries were cheating. And we found the Japanese were with like Yamato, what was the other one? Yamato and Musashi, was it Musashi? They had, so our ship was supposed to have 14-inch guns. But when we found people were cheating, we put in 16-inch guns instead. Fortunately, they were able to make that work. But the Japanese, those 2 had 18.1-inch guns. Really big and scary.
Was that the battleship? That was they had this monstrous battleship, and they were trying to bring it down to, it was like, they didn't realize it was a suicide mission, bring it down to Okinawa. They only put enough fuel on it to get it there. And we had intercepted their code again, and it never made it.
Yeah, that was one thing we did. We had broken their code. And they didn't know that, thankfully, but yes, we had broken their code. So that was helpful for us.
They also sent 300 aircraft, and because we had broken the code, 150 of them were shot down before they ever got there. And about 150 finally arrived, and they tended, the heavy, I think the aircraft carriers and real battleships were more in the center, and a lot of smaller aircraft, smaller naval craft were on the outside.
Right.
And they tended to attack those. In fact, I had an uncle that was on a landing ship tank and got hit by one of those kamikazes, and there only 6 people survived. He got blown off the thing and in the water for several hours before he got picked up.
Mercy.
But they got, none of those 150 ever got back.
No, they put destroyers and destroyer escorts at the very edge, and that's what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to take it.
Yeah.
They're submarine hunters.
Yeah.
They're hunting for submarines and stuff, so yeah, they're on the front lines. And we're like a big city, and they're like a crossroads, so they don't have a whole lot of luxuries. And I can't imagine the rough seas in those small ships. It's really good. Any other questions? I hope you all come see us. We have changed over the years. Right now, the superstructure that is the part above the main deck is not open at the moment, except during Battleship 101, because our mast is being repaired. So that's happening right now. So. Besides, you don't want to come in the summer anyway unless you send your visitors up there.
When is that going to be completed, the renovations?
Well, it was supposed to be completed at the end of May, and now they're looking at mid-August. From what I understand, they're doing a really nice job. So we just told them they didn't have to hurry, just do a really good job. This is, these repairs are being funded by, let's see, it's after Florence or Michael, and I want to say it came from the National Park Service, gave the states like 50 million, and $1 million of that came to us. So we decided to tack that on to the hull repairs and stuff. It's a really big crane we have sitting out there right now.
All right, that was excellent. Thank you so much for coming. If you want more, we have a few of these books for sale. If you want to, this is the book that Cindy wrote. It was her thesis, and then she published it, and has all those stories and more that she was telling today. So
All of the books are signed by Cindy,
It's
too.
a special, we have a special discounted price today for $25. And so we have those over there. We hope to see you next month here. And also, in between on July 1st and 2nd, Bob and I will be at the cemetery in the morning giving tours, 9 and 10:30? Yes, 9 and 10:30. So if you want to tour the cemetery, and also the jail will be open that weekend and on the 4th of July. So hope to see you all there. Pardon me? The Smithville Burying Ground.
Oh, okay. The old burial ground.
The old burial ground, yes. Okay.
And that's gonna be next month?
That would be July 1st and 2nd.
Okay. Great.
For the 4th of July celebration, yeah. All right, thank you.